Hello, everyone. I'm David Younger,
Hi, I'm Elvin Keles.
and we created chronic illness therapy to provide support and resources for people living with chronic health conditions. Today, in our talk, we're going to talk about the findings of a study that Elvin conducted about coping mechanisms for people with advanced cancer. This can be applied to other chronic illnesses as well, and we'll discuss some key differences between people that cope better and worse, and an important concept that's critical in distinguishing between the two.
Great.
So how about starting off with, there's something that you said about cancer patients with a fighting spirit tend to have lower levels of depression and anxiety, whereas cancer patients with coping styles such as helplessness, hopelessness, anxious preoccupation, and fatalism tend to be more depressed or anxious. So why don't we talk about fighting spirit? What does it mean to have a fighting spirit?
Fighting spirit is a problem-solving focused approach when it comes to dealing with cancer. I mean, it's defined in the context of cancer, but I think it can be applied to any other chronic illness. It's about not feeling crushed by the diagnosis you receive, and it's about being okay. Let's see what we can do about it. It's about being having a problem-focused style rather than a passive, I don't know what's going to happen to me kind of approach. But having a fighting spirit doesn't mean that you're not worried about what's going to happen to you. It doesn't mean you're not going to be sad. It just means that you don't give up. You don't give up.
So it's about being resilient.
Right?
Yeah.
And flexible. Exactly. Yeah.
And the other thing that you said is that there's an emphasis on internal locus of control, meaning that you feel that you have control over how you relate to whatever circumstances that are outside of our control. Like if you get cancer or any diagnosis, that's not something you can control, right? But how we relate to it is what is really important with respect to fighting spirit.
Totally, especially for cancer, where a lot of people actually feel quite healthy before they receive a diagnosis, and it's all of a sudden you receive this diagnosis that something potentially lethal is growing inside you, and you feel like, how come I'm so healthy?
Right.
And with other chronic illnesses as well, it feels like your body has a mind of its own, and you have no control over it. And it's mind-blowing, really. A lot of people feel like they're losing it when they receive such diagnosis. And the thing with the fighting spirit is once you find your balance, if you can feel like, okay, so this thing is going to have its own course, but there are certain things that I can do for myself, and let me just focus on them and find a balance in my life again. It's about finding your balance again, because you had the balance before. This is about finding it again.
Yeah, it's like getting knocked off the horse or knocked off your surfboard, and you get thrown by the waves and you don't even know where you are, and it's like finding your way back on and achieving some sort of balance.
Another definition I have for fighting spirit is not something that you would find in these research studies, but based on my clinical experience, is I think people who are more self-oriented than others-oriented tend to have a bigger fighting spirit orientation. Let me give you an example. One of my husband's patients, this guy was diagnosed with a glioblastoma multiforme. It's one of the deadliest type of brain tumors, stage 3. And my husband's a neurosurgeon, so he focuses on brain tumors. So he operated on this guy, and then he received his chemo at MD Anderson. It was a experimental drug, and he to this day, it's been more than 20 years. He's healthy and very much alive, which is a record. He's definitely one of the outliers. But on the other hand, something really drastic and very tragic happened. Shortly after he received his treatment, his daughter died in a car accident. And the first thing this guy asked my husband was, will this tragedy bring back my cancer? So this is about how self-oriented he is. And I want to say that this does not mean that you don't have integrity, but this is how much you need to care about yourself.
So why why is that? How is that helpful in terms of fighting spirit versus other? You said self versus other
Yeah,
oriented. So
I think
someone who's other oriented in that example would just be focusing on the
the
loss.
loss, exactly, and not be able maybe to recover from that. Whereas
Hmm.
this guy had all his defenses going for him. You
Right.
know, he certainly felt terrible about the loss of his daughter, and they had years and years of therapy for
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
But I mean, the main point was the guy was also very aware that this could have, affect his health in an adverse way, and so he was trying to really um, he was trying to, well, he was alone when he was talking to my husband about this, so maybe his wife wouldn't have liked to hear that, but he was very aware of this, so he was very concerned about himself, whereas maybe someone who's more others oriented wouldn't even think about this after they lose a daughter. And there's nothing wrong with this. I'm just saying this is what I keep seeing in people who have this fighting spirit, but doesn't mean that they don't care about others. They do, but they care for themselves a lot, and I don't think that there's something negative about it. It's certainly different than many others. The guy really cared about his daughter and family, and he did his best, pair that lost, and they came together with his wife, and they really connected in therapy, and they worked on their loss, and they still are working for many years. They're together and they're happy. But it was a tremendous loss. Obviously, the loss of a child is the worst. uh, but I think there's something about the story that is very odd for many people, but to me it just speaks for itself. That self-orientation is so strong, the surviving instinct is so strong. That's what I'm trying to emphasize. I'm not just saying don't care about anything. He does care. He did care. He worked a lot on himself for this, and he did feel the loss tremendously. But for me, what stands out for many when I work with cancer patients is the ability to sometimes cut the ties with people who are hurting the person or not making them feel good, really caring for themselves, not in terms of eating kale and other good stuff, but just really like psychologically, what feels good for me, I'll do that, and if it doesn't feel good for me, I won't do it, as much as they can. And they're very outspoken about this, and not feeling like, oh, did I do the right thing, did I do the wrong thing?
Hmm.
And I'm
Yeah.
saying that's a good thing. That's not very much talked in society. We receive more acknowledgement when we care for others.
So it's often, when we focus on ourselves, it's often considered to be selfish or even narcissistic. And
Yes.
but there obviously, what we're talking about here is that there are really healthy, important survival aspects of what's considered to be selfish. That there's healthy narcissism, there's healthy self-care and self-reflection, and that these are all that they're actually critical when you're diagnosed uh, with a chronic illness, is the focus on taking care of yourself.
Again, this week I was at a talk at Institute of Spirituality and Health in Houston. There was this guy called Lawrence Payne. He's a very famous character in social circles here. He's an extraordinary man, big, tall guy. And he said something, and he's a theologian. How do you say
Theologian. Uh-huh.
theologian?
Hmm.
And he said something extraordinary, which I like very much. Maybe I can say it in that way. He said, we are brought to this earth only to be in service of others. You may share this view or not. I don't, but I respect that. I like it. And then he said, in order to be able to serve others, we need to really be self-oriented.
Hmm.
I love that. He said, you need to care about yourself first, so you gather all your strength so that you can serve others. And after I approached him for this, and I said to him, that was a very good point. And then he told me, you know what? I learned this by experience. He said, I had a stroke twice, and I had to relearn how to talk and walk and eat my food on my own twice. It took him 2.5 years.
Wow.
Extraordinary story. And he's one of the
And
kindest
anyone
people.
who's in a relationship or a parent can also is dealing with um, the struggles between taking care of yourself versus taking care of others. And
Certainly.